In this video, let's see what does it mean by self, and where we can use the self and where it is not necessary to use the self, where we write it in within a class or a structure or an enum. So first in place, let's say what does Apple documentation is saying about the self property. It is saying like every instance of a type has an implicit property called self, which is exactly equivalent to the instance itself. That means if I'm saying self dot something, means that class or structure or whatever may be the model instance, it refers to that model instance. Use the self property to refer to the current instance within its own instance methods. So this is what self means, and in our daily programming we use self everywhere. In this tutorial, let's see where it is actually needed. Now let me take a class, for example, let's say product. For example, it's having a init method. For this, let's say I have product. I don't know, let me say it has a name. Sorry, it has a name where it has an ID. Now I'm writing the initialization for this name, which is an optional again, comma ID again, which is an optional. With this it gets initialized. Now if I directly write it, for example, if I write it, okay, I need to take these values and I need to assign this to my model properties, which is a class here, and here properties. Now if I try to assign it like this, so let's see what happens. If I try to assign it like this, it gives me error saying cannot assign to value, name is a let constant. But you will be wondered, but here name is a var, but actually this is referring to these parameters which are by default, which are lets. That means this one, it is taking it as this one, you are trying to edit it, this value again you are trying to assign it. That's how it will take it. That is what it is saying, cannot assign to a value, name is a let constant. Why? Because it's a let constant. So actually you want to assign this value to this. To access this, what do we need to do is, we don't have any other option, we need to call this self dot name, self dot id. That means these are the parameters I'm assigning it to my properties. So self means it refers to the instance of the product. That means if I create, let p is equal to product, okay, let's say some value id is some 10. So when it goes to the initialization, what will it see? uh, Self dot name, this value will become this value, this value will become this value. This is one use case of self where it is mandatory to use self, without which it will give the build errors. And having said that, if we if we are if the property names are different, that means, for example, name value, id value, in this case we don't need to use self. Why? Because in this context name will be taken as the property name. So now I assign this. Now this id value is equal to id. Now if you can look at it, it's not giving me any build errors. Id is equal to id value. Okay, this is because of the these parameters I have changed. That's why we have got this error. So it is technically not needed if property names and this model property names both are different. Then while assigning it, we don't need to use the self. If I say name, okay, it will take it as okay, this property. So this is where we need to see whether actually self is needed or not. Not only in the initialization method, for example, in the normal methods also the same applies. And so let it be set product name, and let me pass a value. Now here also if I try to set it, it will give me a build error. Why? Because this name and this method property name both are same. So if I try this again, we will get the same error saying like name is a let constant, cannot assign it to, assign to value. Why? Because name is a let constant. So again, I have no other choice that we need to use self.name. If this value is also going to be different, then again, though it's this value, then again I don't need to use the self. I can go ahead with this. That means within this context, until unless we have a scenario where this method parameter names and model properties are having the same name, then we have to use the self. Otherwise, this technically no need. So name is equal to name value. Now again, it is used in let's say I have a closure method, let's say which is having, let c is equal to something. Here sometimes we need to use self dot something, otherwise uh, it will give the builder let's say bbb. Now within this context, as it's a closure, if I don't use self, we will get build errors like this, which is saying call to method set product name in closure requires explicit use of self. So here self is needed. Otherwise, so there are two scenarios where in the model methods, if method parameters names and model property names are having the same name, then we need to use the self. Or if we are having a closure, then if we are accessing something of this particular model property or method, then I need self. Apart from these, we do not need to use self everywhere. Okay, so in this case, usage of self, we don't need actually. It's not wrong. We can use it, but technically we don't need to use it. So this is the advantage of the Swift language, and it's a good idea to use that advantage, like type inference, like where if I have is valid, let's say I'm taking a bool and by default let's say its value is false. So technically here I don't need to mention this. The moment I am assigning something, see, I'll not get any build errors also. So these are some of the advantages of Swift language, that we can use it so that the code will be more readable and understandable, and it appears very clean. And I hope this video is helpful. Thank you.